We're just weeks away from the Nintendo Switch 2's release. It's an exciting time for gamers. Some are excited about the system and the new and enhanced games coming out, while others are just excited to have something new to be mad about. And while it seems like everyone was annoyed at the high price tags of the system, the accessories, and the games, it also looks like plenty of people were willing to shell out for it, including me. Yes, in full disclosure, I too pre-ordered a console. The bundle, mind you, because I'm not paying $80 for Mario Kart World. But that brings us to the issue at hand. The industry's trying to kill physical games. And we're gonna let them. Let's be honest, this has been brewing for a long time. What was once a purely physical medium of consumption has slowly transitioned to a hybrid model, with the end game of the industry being a purely digital landscape. I'll admit I'm a big fan of physical copies. I know it's because that's what I grew up with, it's what I'm familiar with, it's what makes me happy. As a kid, I always had to buy physical games, so it's not an inconvenience or a barrier for me. It's sort of ingrained in my psyche. There's something special about taking a case, unwrapping it for the first time, and being able to hold a cartridge or disc in your hand. It gives me that small jolt of dopamine I crave, and it helps me tie the outgoing of money to something tangible. I give you something and you give me something back. I do not get that same sensation watching a download bar crawl ever closer to the end. Admittedly, it was way more special back when I used to actually put effort into manuals and inserts, but this still does the job. There's nothing like popping this into your console and sitting down to play. It just helps create that physical connection to the game, and way before downloads started overwhelming us, it made you really commit to that one game. Not that it was hard or anything, but there was a barrier to playing something else. You had to get up, eject the disc or cartridge, put it away so it doesn't get scratched, and insert another game if you wanted to play something else. Or you could lend it to a friend, sell it online, or trade it to GameStop. I really wish you couldn't do that, only because then I'd still have a lot of the games and consoles I owned when younger that I traded in, but that's more my fault than anything else. On trips, you were limited in what you could bring. You had to be intentional about what you wanted to play because it all depended on how many games you could fit in your case. That's not the case now. Now you're only limited by this. How many games can you fit on this one card or an unrepairable hard drive? For some people, the idea of having all your games on one memory card or on one device sounds like bliss, but to me, it sounds like a nightmare. When I have too many choices of what to play, I too often can't decide what to play. I have to limit my options so I can actually play through something instead of hopping from game to game. To me, physical games are part of the experience of gaming, and while, yes, they can sometimes be very frustrating when a game gets scratched or damaged or just doesn't want to load anymore, I think they're still a valuable part of gaming's charm. Collecting is a part of it as well. I'm not a massive collector by any means, but as I've gotten older, I have developed an appreciation for it. The memories I have playing games are, in a sense, tied to that physical game. That physical copy, whether it works or I even have the means to play it, is special. I don't have that feeling with anything I own digitally, much less things I'm renting. It's why I've tried to slowly over the years rebuy the games I long ago traded away. I still have a lot of work to do. We've all seen it coming. It's been slowly building momentum over the years, and no, it's not just Nintendo's fault. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Xbox was the first to introduce digital games. Maybe Wii's Virtual Console would count, but either way, it was that generation of gaming where digital games started to appear for us console gamers. But it was still very niche. The consoles, at least the initial release consoles, didn't have massive hard drives. The 360 topped out at 20 gigabytes and the PS3 at 60 gigabytes. But then again, the games weren't nearly as large as they are now, so you could still fit a few on there if you wanted to. Physical games were still dominant that generation, but that generation laid the groundwork for a digital revolution. It wasn't until the next generation that we really saw where this was going. All three systems, PS4, Xbox One, and Wii U, had digital game downloads. They also had physical copies available for their games. But then we started seeing the sizes balloon, and the response was to have some of the game on the disc while requiring you to download the rest from a server. In the past, this would have been done by including a second or sometimes third disc with the game, because one of the very real limitations of physical media is capacity. These discs and cartridges can only hold so much, but a server can hold so much more. Now that systems were connected to the internet, whether we wanted them to be or not, the companies could require you to connect to download the rest of the game or the entire game. They no longer had to stuff the entire game on the disc, which really started to beg the question, what did you really have if you didn't have the whole game? Half a game? An unplayable disc without internet connection? I mean, they made you install the games anyway in order to play it, right? Wouldn't it just be easier to download that game? And cheaper? And that's where all digital consoles come in. Discounting any phone games and such, I think the PSP Go was the first console I can think of that completely removed all physical game support. Instead, it relied solely on downloaded games from the PlayStation Store. Xbox introduced the Xbox One Digital very late in the One's life cycle.
Go all digital? It had never been done before. Except movies, music, books, the almanac. I guess it wasn't totally impossible.
You just deleted the disk drive.
Exactly.
I don't quite get its appeal. It was $50 cheaper than the One S, looked the exact same, but had no 4K disk drive. I didn't like it then, but it did show just what the major players had in the works. And for the next generation, we finally saw it. Both Xbox and PlayStation introduced all digital launch consoles for the Series and PlayStation 5. Now, they went about it a little differently, with the Series S being much cheaper and a less powerful version of the Series X, while the PS5 Digital was not quite as cheap and kept the same power. With these two systems, you had no choice but to buy the digital games. But at least you had a choice in purchasing the all-digital system. I do wonder how much longer that will last now that we have an all-digital Series X console as well. Xbox is probably the one pushing an all-digital future more than anyone else. Not that that's surprising. They didn't want you sharing your games 15 years ago. They've probably eaten away at physical sales the most with Game Pass, but it's hard to argue with that service. So many games available for a low monthly price. Why pay for physical or even digital games if you can just pay a monthly fee and get access to over hundreds of games, with brand new AAA games being available on day one? It's an admittedly fantastic service. Not that I have it, but I completely get it. Sadly, it's just adding to the demise of physical games, and I fear creating a world where the only option for those games is Game Pass, with nothing but our annoyance and online outrage to stop Microsoft from raising the price year after year after year. If I used Game Pass, I could totally see saving $50 and buying the all-digital Series X, but I would hate to be locked to their arbitrary pricing for games. With the Switch 2 right around the corner, I think we can see just where Nintendo wants to take this new digital phase. A kind of a cool thing Nintendo's introduced is the game card, the ability to create a digital card of your digital game and share it with a friend. Sure, it's not the same as actually lending out a game to your friend or trading it in so you can buy another game, but it's something. Something else that's, I think, more than something is how they're treating their physical games this time around. You see, with the Switch 1, Nintendo moved away from disc-based games and back to cartridges, which they love, which, they are more reliable, especially for handhelds. But the problem with cartridges is that they're pricey. They really are. There's just no way around it. So Nintendo provided several different size cartridges to publishers, with each increased size costing more for the publishers. More cost means less profit for the developers, and this time around it looks like Nintendo's only going to offer 3 options for cartridges. A small size cartridge, maybe 1 GB, an expensive 64 GB size cartridge, and then an empty cartridge, which is their new Game Key card. Basically, unless your game is very small, they're pushing you toward this empty cartridge, which requires you to download a copy of the game. It's not a digital copy of the game, you still need the cartridge in your system, but there's nothing on the actual cartridge. So, not only do you get the downside of needing the cartridge in your system to play said game, it's also going to take up space on your Switch. And while the Switch 2 comes with more storage, it's still only 256 GB, and the micro SD cards have to be the faster and more expensive variety. If you like buying physical because it doesn't fill up your console's memory, well, that's not going to work out very well this time around. The really only benefit to this empty game cartridge is you can still give it to your friend or trade it away, which I do think is better than a purely digital future, but we have to ask ourselves, What are we actually paying for? We already know the industry doesn't believe that buying a game means you own it. You're only buying a license to play something for as long as they decide you can play it. With a physical copy, that doesn't matter as much because, well, the game's on here, and so as long as you have a working system and the physical copy works, you can play this whenever you like. But what happens when one day you go to put this red cartridge in your ancient Switch 2 and it tries to connect to a server that's no longer operating? Will you get a message saying, sorry, we've discontinued this functionality. Please purchase a Switch 4 for $600 and purchase the remastered remake while you're at it? I don't know, but I think it's likely to happen. I haven't seen anyone say this yet, but since Switch 1 cartridges work on Switch 2 no problem, I do wonder if Nintendo will still manufacture and sell the Switch 1 cartridges to indie developers and like limited run games so they can put new games that are bigger than say 1 gigabyte or whatever the smallest Switch 2 cartridge size is on an actual cartridge. It wouldn't need to be on the new and faster Switch 2 cartridges to work. I don't know if Switch 1 cartridges don't give a game access to the better specs and other things like the mouse function. I don't know, but I hope Nintendo keeps this as an option for developers who want to release an actual physical game on the cartridge. But let's be real. If it is an option for now, it'll be phased out soon enough by Nintendo. The problem I see with digital games is there's just no competition, or at least very minimal competition. Sure, digital games go on sale every once in a while, less once in a while for Nintendo first-party games, but you're never going to get those great deals you once could from places like GameStop or Best Buy or Walmart. The buy one, get one free, the massive sales for Black Friday, that's how I bought many of the games I have now. Sure, you have to wait until games have been out for a long time to get those deals, but at least they happen. Retailers want to move merchandise, and on top of that, they just want you coming into the store hoping you'll buy something else that's more profitable. And they have to compete with the resale market, either GameStop or eBay. They can't expect to sell brand new games at $70 for forever if you can buy the used game from someone else for $30 or $40. That's not really a concern with digital storefronts. They're just looking for the revenue stream to keep flowing. Digital games don't cost anything to sell. Well, I mean, they do, but it's very minimal in the grand scheme of things. But compared to a physical game which has a case, used to have a manual or artwork, has a physical thing, either a disc or cartridge that costs money to manufacture. It has to be shipped, stored in a warehouse or on shelves, and it has to be sold by someone. All these costs add up and ultimately take away from the profit of the game. I don't think it's any surprise that console manufacturers and game developers want an all-digital future. They'd make way more selling you a $70 digital game than a $70 physical game. We've never really seen a situation where there's a price difference between physical and digital, at least not when a game is new, but it does look like that might be the case with some of the games for the Switch 2, likely because of the cost of the cartridges themselves. Offering digital versions cheaper will drive some people to buy them that way. I still personally like the idea of owning a copy, or at least the idea of a copy of a game, and usually gravitate toward the physical version, with some exceptions. And if the price difference is big enough, say $15, that makes it that much harder to choose physical. But most people don't seem to care. They want what's convenient, they want what's cheaper, and I don't blame them at all. It feels like the console manufacturers are trying to push us in that direction. They want us to buy digital so they can cut out all the middlemen in the distribution channel. So we can't share those games with friends, or trade them in so someone else can pay GameStop to play a game instead of them. Best Buy's already removed physical media for movies and TV shows. How much longer until they remove video games? I'm sure some people will say that PCs have been basically all digital for a while now, and that's worked out pretty well. And to that, I'd say, yeah, sure, but PCs are not like consoles. Consoles are closed-off systems. PCs, not nearly as much. You can't put a PlayStation game in an Xbox console, even if that game is available on Xbox. But you can play your PC game on any other PC. And storefronts like Steam allow you to play all your licensed games on a variety of systems, including Switch-like handhelds. If your computer dies, or you upgrade the graphics card, or you just buy a whole new system one day, it's probably going to be able to play all of your old games still. You can be fairly confident that everything you've bought pretty much going to be compatible with your next system. From a console gamer, that is actually very refreshing, and it's one of the more annoying things about console gaming, if I'm being honest. Console games just aren't like PC games. I don't entirely understand it, and I won't pretend to, but there's just too much of a difference in the hardware architecture between generations that games just can't run on them. So backwards compatibility isn't always guaranteed, and it's not always flawless even when it's allowed. The 360 was backwards compatible with Xbox games, but it wasn't perfect. I remember Knights of the Old Republic 2 had some audio glitches that they just couldn't get to work right on the 360 because it wasn't hardware based, but it was done through emulation. And some games just weren't compatible with that. And even then it was only possible to play a select few Xbox games on the 360. The entire library was not available. The original PS3 was completely backward compatible with PS2 games, but even that was slowly phased out to emulator only and then not at all. Console games are not guaranteed to run on the next console. Even for Nintendo, who yes, they've often been one of the best at supporting backwards compatibility. The Game Boy Advance could play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, DS could play Game Boy Advance games, 3DS could play DS games, Wii could play GameCube, Wii U could play Wii. The Switch had a completely different form factor and went from disc-based games to cartridges, so you kind of had to give them a pass for that. But look at the Switch 2. Same cartridge slot, but not every Switch 1 game is going to run on the Switch 2. I think again we're seeing that the system has changed just enough that the games have issues running natively. While this might just be a need for an update or more tinkering with the code to smooth out issues, it highlights just how important the original hardware is, which is why physical copies are so important. Because these games aren't going to be available to download forever. Just look at the Wii U, 3DS, PS3 and Vita shops being shut down or scheduled for shutdown. There was even a big issue about a year back where Sony removed a bunch of shows that people had bought. Even if you had it downloaded, Sony went in and removed it. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just robbery. I think they did go back and correct that by updating a license, but it's just those kinds of things that keep me up at night. I mean, not really, there are far more important things to worry about in the world, but still, it's pretty important. If I buy something, I should have access to it in perpetuity. I guess the point is these servers are not going to stay open forever, which sadly means these digital games aren't going to be available forever, at least not through official means. But I do hate having to rely on modded consoles to play games. I would much rather have a reliable source of those games. Because console games are inevitably tied to the consoles they came out on. I completely understand that companies move on. They move on to the next console, their next games, and that's great. I think we all want them to move on. We want new and better systems and new and better games, but we also love our old games, and we want to play and discover games we never knew. In an all-digital future, we're only able to play and discover what they want us to, what they make available to us. I can pop in Pokemon Yellow and play it right now on a Game Boy, almost 30 years after it came out. In fact, that's what I've been playing lately. I can only hope we're able to say that in 30 years about the next Pokemon game. Assuming, of course, it's still worth playing in 30 years. But anyway, thanks for watching, and thanks to all of you who have subscribed to the channel. I'm floored by how well my videos have done, and it means so much to see the positive feedback in the comments. It really does. It's just, let me know what you think. Do you think we'll always have some form of physical, or is it closer to being faded out than I'd like? Anyway, as Nurse Joy always says, I hope to see you again soon. Why did she say that when I'm giving her fainted Pokemon?